Welcome back to Lose Your Homes and Hustles. I'm Jessica Williams, aka Miss Indianapolis Real Estate, here with Stacy Preston.
Hello, we're excited to be here today to talk about first-time home buyers. So what do you have, Jessica?
All right. So, Stacy, I know when we spoke earlier this year, end of last year, beginning of this year, the first-time home buyer age was 38 years old, and our goal for 2025 was to get that age down. Now that we're at the end of 2025, I'm assuming you already know this, but do you know what the age of the first-time home buyer is now?
I do. And I remember last year when those stats came out, we thought 38 was just like so unbelievable.
Yes.
But this year, the first-time home buyer age is 40, which is just crazy. Again, we're trying to get that age down. I know in my 2025 first-time home buyers, they were younger than 40, so that's good. But we've got to keep working on this, Jessica.
Absolutely. Us and every other agent out there, because it is so
Yep.
important to have people investing in themselves sooner rather than later. I mean, 40, we're getting pretty close to retirement age. So we need to start investing a little sooner than that, personal opinion. But
yeah,
yes, that is one of our goals for 2026 now, because obviously we dropped the ball a little bit for 2025 because that age went up, but 2026 is the new year. Our hope is to get that age down. So.
And we both feel like there's a lot of opportunity for first-time home buyers this year. So hopefully we can convince you to at least take a look at it.
Absolutely. Which is why we're having an event in January, kick off the year in January with a first-time home buyer workshop, which we'll get into a little bit later. But before we do that, we wanted to go ahead and get into a little bit of, 2025 wins specifically for our first-time home buyers. So Stacy, do you have a couple of wins you'd like to share?
Yeah, I do. I felt like 2025 was a great year for my first-time home buyers I worked with. As an agent, this year I worked with more first-time home buyers than I have in my whole career. And I just think because the market is kind of conducive to that, a lot of the buyers that would normally be trading up are holding off because they've got really great rates and they're locked in. But the first-time home buyers don't have that lock-in effect. So I had some success with several. And I wanted to ask you a question. Back in 2020, 2021, what is the max amount of offers you made with one buyer in particular? My max was 8. I had a buyer that made 8 offers. It took that many times to get an offer accepted. Do you remember what yours was?
Honestly, I don't know the count. It was a lot, but I know it was over 6 months of looking and putting in offers. So I am glad to be further and further stepping away from that kind of market, specifically for buyers. Sure, sellers loved it, but for the buyers, it was not good for making the biggest purchase of their lives to have to make a decision so quickly and maybe concede a little bit on inspections or anything else.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I'm happy
after like
away.
6 months or 8 offers, your buyer at that point was just like, give them whatever they want, right? I'll waive this, I'll waive that. And I felt like at that point in time, our buyers just weren't as protected as they are now. So I asked that to say, I feel like the win for 2025 is that the first-time home buyers I worked with, in most cases, were not in multiple offer situations, which was awesome. It also gave us a little bit of breathing room. If we found a house we liked, they could actually maybe sleep on it, think about it, run some numbers, make sure everything works. And then where I really saw some good wins were in the negotiations for inspections. So I had a first-time home buyer that was able to get to negotiate a new roof before closing. It was put on before closing, so that was awesome. I had one that purchased a flip and it wasn't great. There were a lot of things that were not done as part of that flip, and the seller actually went back and negotiated almost all of our repairs that we asked for. And that just wasn't happening back in the 2020, 2021 market. So I felt that the buyers that did get in got, again, it wasn't as stressful as it was. They didn't have to look at 100 houses. They could find one, make an offer, and actually get it accepted, but also before closing, get some things done that needed to happen. So what about you? What were some wins that you saw the buyers you helped in 2025?
Yeah. Similar to your inspections, obviously being able to negotiate that for buyers has definitely been one of the top things. But in addition to that, it's also been having seller concessions. So, and in case anyone doesn't know what seller concessions are, it's a credit from the seller to the buyer at closing. So we've been able to negotiate those as well as list price, so offer price. I want to also point out that I think there might be a misconception where some people think you can only negotiate if a property's been on the market for, say, 30 plus days. And in one of my cases, the property was on the market for 2 days and it had a lot of activity when we were at the property. I had two other showings the same day we toured it, and we were able to get $16,000 off that list price on a home that had a lot of activity within its
Wow,
first hitting the
that's
market.
awesome.
So I think that there is still definitely room for negotiating on price. Again, we worked on some with multiple offers together, and people were able to walk away with money at closing, which I think is really important for people to know that that is a possibility. So yeah, those are some of my wins for 2026. And again, to your point with inspections, getting new sewer lines, negotiated into being done, different things like that really truly help a buyer coming in who, especially if they're limited on funds, but also you don't want to be coming into something that you're going to have to be pouring tons of money into right away on those big
Right.
ticket items.
Yeah. So I think overall it was a great year for first time home buyers, at least in my experience. It sounds like you had the same experience. So what are some opportunities that you see for first time home buyers in 2026?
Opportunities for 2026. Yeah, I do think buyers are definitely going to have more options as far as inventory is concerned. I do think that there's going to be about 14% more sales next year as far as NAR's forecasting. So I think that'll be definitely an opportunity. I still think there'll be negotiating power for them, even with a hot spring market. I mean, spring is always generally, there's always an uptick in the spring market, regardless of how the market is. So I don't want people to get scared of that. There might be a little bit more buyer competition, but I still think with the increased inventory, it's still an opportunity. And any opportunity to start investing in yourself sooner rather than later is always a win in my book.
Yeah, I agree.
But what about you, Stacey? What do you think some wins are for 2026 for buyers?
For 2026, I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw in 2025. However, we are starting the year off with rates that are lower than they were in 2025. So that helps with affordability, which could mean we're going to see a little bit more competition. But I also think there's been sellers holding off on listing because they wanted to wait till rates were more favorable. So I think it'll be similar, but I still think it's a great time for first time home buyers to get out there and really see if they can make this happen. And one important thing I like to just remind first time home buyers of is like sometimes your first house isn't necessarily your forever home, right? It might be smaller or not in the location you want or, whatever. But the first house you buy is going to be the down payment on your dream home. And the faster and sooner you can get into that first home, the faster that dream home is going to happen as well. And I know you and I both have worked with buyers and sellers that are selling that first home and moving into the next home. And I don't know about you, but most of the time, those buyers are not like writing a check from their savings account to make that next purchase. They are rolling their equity over from that first home into the second one. So just remember that your expectations as a first-time home buyer, I mean, it is not going to be, probably not going to be the HGTV dream home, but it's going to be a stepping stone to get you to that point.
Perfectly said. Yeah. Stepping stone for trading up later down in life is so important to keep in the back of your mind for first-time home buyers. So great point.
So tell us a little bit about the event we've got coming up.
Yes. So in the efforts of Stacey and I's goals in 2026 of lowering that first-time homebuyer age, we are kicking off the new year right with a first-time homebuyer workshop. Now we are co-hosting that event with Tim Streets with Fairway Mortgage. He'll be the lender with us that evening on January 20th, and we'll be discussing quite a few different things, what the process looks like, really providing clarity to folks who have uncertainties about what the process either looks like or maybe some myths that they don't quite understand yet. So if you want to go into that a little bit more, Stacey, take it away.
Yeah, so Tim is great in working with first-time home buyers. And a lot of times buyers are like, I think I want to buy. It might not be for 6 months or a year. And talking with a lender is really a great first step because there are things that you may need to do with savings or credit or paying off debt. And they can kind of give you a path of like, you should pay this off first. You need this much in savings to give you kind of that game plan. So that's the first thing. Second is just kind of going through the process itself and, the timeline and how that all works and how the realtor and lender work together. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about buying your first home. A lot of people think you need at least 20% down. That's absolutely not the case. And as Jessica mentioned, there are definitely some down payment assistance and grant programs out there that we'll also be talking about. And we'll also talk about how You can negotiate your closing costs if that's something you might need. We'll also have some fun and some giveaways, so can't forget that. But I think it's just a great event, even if you're not even sure if you can buy in 2026, but it's something you're thinking about. It's a great way to come and help like get a plan in place of like what that looks like for you.
Yep. It's never too early to start learning. That's for sure. If you are looking to start your home ownership era next year, we will provide the event details in the link below so you can go ahead and register there. So help us reduce that first-time homebuyer age. So
That's
yeah,
right.
we're looking forward to it for sure. So, all right. Well, that's it for today's show. So thanks for joining us on Hoosier Homes and Hustles, and let's hustle smarter together.
Together.